You don't have to know the difference between a body check and a breakaway to celebrate the U.S. winning gold in both men's and women's hockey. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Now, if you want to watch instead of just listen, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening arrows. Before we jump into today's topic, which I'm really excited about, I just want to take a moment and encourage you to circle back to your New Year's resolution. If you joined us a couple of months ago, you may remember that podcast where we talked about what kind of resolution are we going to set? And remember, I encourage you to not set a pass-fail resolution, but to set a resolution that was a habit. And you know what the good news about working to create a habit is? If you haven't done it yet, you still can. So don't forget that. Don't just because it's February, it's almost March, think, oh well, it didn't happen. Guess what? Those things never happen like you want them to. The goal that I set for this year is a work in progress, and that's okay. So I just want to encourage you in that. Today we are going to talk about something that involves the Winter Olympics. And I just have to say that as a 8 to 10-year-old child, even through my teen years, into my 20s, I loved sports. And I was spoiled when I was young because when I was, how old would I have been? I would have been about 10 years old when the Dallas Cowboys won 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. It was an incredible run. Has not been repeated since then. But I'm telling you, mid 1990s, we were doing great. And it wasn't just the Cowboys I loved any sports, and the Olympics were extra special because, and kids, you may not believe this, but I'm telling you, it's really true. We did not have a TV out all the time, but my parents would let us watch the Olympics. And so we pulled out a TV. I just want you to picture this. This TV, the screen is about as big as a laptop, and it's in black and white, and we used rabbit ears. None of that may make any sense to you, but trust me, that was a real thing that existed, and it was always a highlight, just a wonderful thing to watch the Olympics as a kid. And of course, I love sports because I just love sports. But I also loved cheering for America. It was instinctive, and it still is. Now, this is a unique part of this podcast is we ask you to actually stop the podcast and talk about questions together. So we're going to have our first pause point. Why do we cheer for our country? It's something that just comes so naturally that people are doing it. But I encourage you to stop and actually think about it. Why do we do this? And it's important because there are some people today who don't want you to celebrate America. And I don't just mean the Chinese or the Russians. I mean people in America, people in positions of power. And that's why I want to talk about this today. Should you celebrate your country just as kind of a general thing? And then should you celebrate America? Now, if you've been listening for a while, you know that I encourage parents and teens or preteens to listen together. And we're always going to start with the best arguments for the side that I personally disagree with. And this is really important because, as a teenager, as a parent of a teenager, you're always trying to help your teens learn. And so, of course, we want to teach them what is right. And it can be very easy to think, well, we should just avoid what is wrong in terms of arguments because I want my teenager to grow up knowing what is right. And it is very important to teach them what is right, but we also must teach them what is wrong and what is appealing about what is wrong so that they're aware of these arguments and they're aware of how to respond. If you want to ask questions like Ali Stuckey or debate like Charlie Kirk did, you must understand your opponent's best arguments. All right, so let's settle in for just a little bit of background. If you were not aware, on Sunday, the U.S. men's hockey team brought home another Olympic gold medal. It was 46 years after the Miracle on Ice when the U.S. won. Actually, that was the game. They beat the Soviet Union that qualified them to play for the gold medal, which they eventually won. Team USA on Sunday defeated Canada 2-1 in overtime, and to secure the third gold medal in American history at the Olympics for hockey. I hope this will inspire kids to put this jersey on someday, as it's the best feeling in the world, Dylan Larkin said after the win. What we just did, nothing will ever match this. Jack Hughes was the hero, or one of the heroes. He scored the winning goal in overtime. I have to say, not a huge hockey fan, but overtime in hockey, it's very hard to beat that. This is what Jack Hughes said. Unbelievable game, unreal game by our team. That's American hockey right there. That's a great Canadian team, but we're USA. We're so proud to be Americans. And the whole team was proud, not just of their efforts, which they should be, but proud of our country, proud to be Americans. The women also won, and they also won in overtime. just an incredible performance. Now, the women's team did decline an invitation from the White House to meet with President Trump, I think to attend the State of the Union as well. And they chalked it up in a very gracious note to their schedules and their players needing to return to either professional hockey or to college. And so I'm not going to encourage you not to think that, oh, this was a political statement. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I think we can think the best of it. But I think there is a worthwhile pause point here. If you were an Olympian, would you accept a presidential invitation from a president you disagreed with politically? If you're a conservative Republican, would you have gone to the White House with Joe Biden there? I think that's worth discussing. All right, so we're going to start with arguments for the wrong side, that you shouldn't celebrate your country and that you specifically shouldn't celebrate America. Argument number one. This is only sports. Who cares? This is a diversion. This is a distraction. This isn't something that's going to improve people's lives. Most people don't even care about sports. And anyway, the U.S. does well because we're rich. It's not because we're just inherently better than everyone. We have money for training and facilities, and that's what it is. Well, why do people even make a big deal about sports? Argument number two. We actually shouldn't be celebrating countries. When you celebrate countries, you're celebrating division. You see, it's divisive to cheer on America because that means you're not cheering on 150 plus other countries. Even if you're in France or Indonesia or South Africa, you shouldn't be cheering on your country. It's just weird, isn't it, to divide people based on geography and ethnicity? Look throughout human history. This has led to conflict and war. All of those wars that you've learned about in history class, they were between countries, different groups of people. And don't dismiss this. In 2015, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, okay, I want you to hear this. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, not internet troll, man leading the country that's just to the north of us. Here's what he told the New York Times Magazine: that Canada could be the first post-national state. He said, quote, "There is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada," end quote. And wouldn't that be a better world? Because that would just be one less thing to divide us. We'd just be united together as human beings. That would just increase peace because countries wouldn't be at each other's throats anymore. All right, let's have a pause point. Why do countries exist? We're thinking about. All right, argument number three. America isn't worth celebrating. Look at our past. Look at slavery. We enslaved millions of people for decades. That's a horrible sin, a horrible stain that we can never wash out. And even after slavery ended, it took another century to 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 get even close to equality before the law, before the Civil Rights Act passed. Look at America. We are the richest country in the world, sure, but there's plenty of poverty. There's plenty of people who don't know where their next meal is going to come from. Look at our country. We're led by Donald Trump, and he's mean. He insults people. He insults people, other countries. The world doesn't respect us. America isn't worth celebrating. All right, let's have a pause point. Could you ever love or celebrate someone who's done something terrible? As you think about that, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Whether you are in the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. Now, as every parent knows, raising kids can feel a bit like a ping pong game. You bounce from moments of joy to moments of deepest concern. Combine this with the busyness of life, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed and even isolated. And as the mom of 4 very busy boys, Charity knows this firsthand. And it's why she created Mama Bear Prayers, to support moms who are on the journey of raising kids. God works through prayer. So be encouraged and listen to Mama Bear Prayers today. All right, let's have a pause point. Which of the great 8 questions would you use in response to these arguments? I remember the great 8 questions are questions we put in our mental toolbox so that when we come across an issue, we know how to examine it. Question 1, what happens next? Question 2, has this been tried before? Question 3, is there a principle involved? Question 4, what are the trade-offs? Question 5, what do you mean by that? Question 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Question 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And question 8, what does the Bible say? All right, so let's respond to these arguments. First, we had this argument that, well, it's just sports. Now, what's appealing about this argument? Well, on the surface level, there is something there, right? It is a sporting activity. I mean, quite literally, it is a sporting activity, and many people aren't that interested in sports. But then we can go to question 3. Is there a principle involved? Yes, there is. And the principle is this. It's good to celebrate America. It's good to have something that we share in common. Look around our country. It's huge. There is a diversity of backgrounds, of incomes, of political beliefs, of religious beliefs. We need to have something that, and not just one thing, some things that bind us together, that we can come together with and say, we are on the same page with this. And sports is one of those things. We can come together, whether you live in the Southeast or the Northwest or the Northeast or the Southwest. We can all come together as Americans and say, wow, look at our hockey team. We are proud of those teams. We are proud of what they accomplish. We are proud that we are Americans, that they went there and they represented us and they won the gold medal. Now, if you step back and think about this in a couple of other areas, this is why the American flag is so important. This is why national heroes are so important. To remain a country, we must have ties that bind us. And this is why it's been so concerning that the left has spent the last decade attacking the flag and tearing down monuments to our founding fathers. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much, but here's what's happening. The left, many people on the left have bought into something called critical theory. And this is based on a Marxist idea that divides people into arbitrary groups, and you're either in the oppressor group or the oppressed group. And you can divide people based on income. You know, that's traditional Marxism is the class-based. People do it on race, critical race theory. That's where that comes from. And what these critical theorists believe is that the oppressors have created a government that benefits them at the expense of the oppressed. And so, in order to set things right, you actually have to tear down the government. And so, think about the implication here. The critical theorist leftist, and many people who don't even, couldn't articulate this, but are going along, they're trying to tear down the country, to tear down the institutions of the country, to tear down the flag, to disrespect and ignore our sporting accomplishments. Why? Because they want to tear down the existing country, the existing institutions, the existing laws, and rebuild something else. So yes, it's just sports, but sports matter more than just for the athletic competition on the field. All right, let's move to argument number 2. Well, we just shouldn't be celebrating countries at all. And let's think about the appeal of this argument. There are obvious divisions in the world. There are obviously countries, and you look throughout history, and countries have fought before. So let's go to question 2. Has this been tried before? Can we go through history? Or are countries some new invention? Did they just happen in the last 2 centuries? Was there peace and prosperity, and then someone invented a country, and all of a sudden everyone rushed to that, and there was war? No. Countries have existed for most of recorded human history. History is the study of empires, and wars are countries fighting against each other. And here's the thing. Even in places with less established governments, they may not say, oh, we have a country, but they have an established government. And largely the places with kind of tribal warfare, life is much harder in those places than places with an established government. This is from Britannica, and it's talking about the establishment of the Aztec Empire. And people may think, oh, the people who were the Indians who were in the Americas originally, they were the tribes, and they didn't really have countries. This is how Britannica talks about the Aztec Empire. Under the ruler Izcoatl from 1428 to 1440, Tenochtitlan, sorry, just got to forgive me for butchering the names, formed alliances with the neighboring states of Texcoco and Tlacopan and became the dominant power in central Mexico. So do you hear that? The countries are forming alliances, even if they wouldn't call themselves countries. Later, by commerce and conquest, Tenochtitlan came to rule an empire of 400 to 500 small states, comprising by 1519 of some 5 to 6 million people. All right, so do you understand that this countries simply are a fact of human existence and have been a fact of human existence for thousands of years. They are not some modern invention. And in fact, we know where countries came from. This is one of the great things about believing in the authority of the Bible. We go to question 8, what does the Bible say? And we find that different people groups were God's response to mankind coming together to exalt mankind instead of God. This is from Genesis 11. But the Lord came down to see the city of Babel, and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So where do countries come from? God separated people, and they formed into people groups that eventually formed governments that became countries. So you're not getting away from it. Countries are going to exist. All right, argument number 3. You shouldn't be proud to be an American. Now, what's appealing about this argument? America has some real sins. Slavery was a horrible, horrible institution. The fact that it took a century to establish kind of basic equality for African Americans, a horrible thing. But that brings us back to this question of, could you ever love or celebrate someone who has done something terrible? Well, you better hope so, because that's everyone. That's your mom. That's your dad. That's yourself. All have sinned. And so, we want the grace, right? When it comes to us, we want people to think of us not on our worst days, not on the worst thoughts or the worst actions we've ever done. Not saying those things don't have consequences. Of course they do. But we'd also like people to look and say, these are some of the things that, by the grace of God, I have done well, or I'm working on, or I'm achieving. And that's how we want to be judged. Well, why shouldn't we judge our country that way? And of course, here's the irony. The left doesn't hold this standard for any country but America. We're told to celebrate Mexico, China, France, and every other country. Celebrate their culture, their uniqueness. And guess what? All of those countries have shameful things in their past. If you look at what's happening in China, there are shameful, horrible, horrific things happening in China right now. So when someone comes to you with this argument, you need to, first of all, see if they're holding it consistently. Is it actually a principle? Go back to question 3. Is there a principle involved? Or is it just something that they're using to attack America? All right, let's look at some arguments for the correct side. Argument number 1. You should be proud of your country. Absent something just horrible going on in your country. And the reason is that your well-being is tied to the well-being of your country. This used to be obvious before the U.S. had so much power and tamped down on a lot of global conflict. Not all global conflict, certainly, but much of it. But one of the reasons that people came together is in tribes or in countries or clans is because other countries or tribes or clans would come and try to kill you. And so you needed a country to protect you. Because if your country wasn't up to snuff, the consequence was death for you or enslavement for you and your family. You are not just an atomized individual floating around randomly, bumping into other individuals. You are an individual created in God's image who is part of a family, who lives in a community, who's the citizen of a country. If you remove one or more of those elements, people become unmoored. Let's go to question 1. What happens next? Well, what happens when we start treating people just as individuals instead of an individual who's part of a family in a community who's a citizen? In 2023, then Surgeon General Vivek Murthy came out with a report on our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Of course, the irony of the federal government enforcing loneliness and isolation for a couple of years during COVID, let's leave that aside. But this is something interesting that he wrote in that report. Loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both individual and societal health. It is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. The mortality impact of being socially disconnected is similar to that caused by smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, and even greater than that associated with obesity and physical inactivity. And the harmful consequences of a society that lacks social connection can be felt in our schools, workplaces, and civic organizations, where performance, productivity, and engagement are diminished. Do you understand that? Being alone is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and worse for your health than being out of shape and inactive. You are not meant to live life alone. And of course, we can go to question 8. What does the Bible say? And remember, as a Christian, the Bible is the answer book. We accept the authority of the Bible. We know it's God's word, and we can just go there and find the answers. But one of the ways that we can show the validity of God's word to people who don't believe in the Bible is we show how the principles in God's word bear out in the real world. And so here we have the U.S. federal government, the Surgeon General, saying loneliness is a disaster. Loneliness is a huge problem. I've heard that before. Genesis 2:18. The Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." It's amazing. Principles right in the Bible, and then it's confirmed by a secular source. And so anyway, people are not meant to be alone. Being a citizen of a country is one way that we are not alone. And then we can go to Jeremiah 29:7. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And so, yes, we should cheer for the country that we are in. We should seek the prosperity and peace of that country. And for those of us who are blessed to live in America, here's argument number 2. America is the greatest country in the history of the world. Now look, let's start with the left's favorite argument against America: slavery. Slavery was a universal institution. It's not now because Western civilization ended it. Britain and America didn't just end slavery in our countries, but throughout most of the world. And America's work to stamp out slavery is something to be immensely proud of. America is a country of settlers, of pioneers, people who came and tamed a new continent, people who came seeking the freedom to worship. Our founding fathers created the greatest governing document in the history of the world, made for a religious people. Our military saved the world during World War II. And we've used our military muscle not to conquer the globe, but to protect shipping lanes and trade. We have the greatest economy in the history of the world, and we haven't done that by exploiting other countries. America has helped usher in an unprecedented decline in global poverty. Americans invented the airplane, air conditioning, and television. Americans put men on the moon. Someday soon, Americans may land on Mars. America is so great that people risk their lives to come here. Think about that. People take the chance of dying simply to come to America because we are a bastion of freedom and opportunity. And if that wasn't enough, we just beat the Canadians in hockey twice. Yes, it's great to be an American, and it's great to celebrate this wonderful country. If you enjoyed this podcast, I encourage you to subscribe on YouTube or text it to a friend. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.